Hi, I am the youngest of 6 children, which has always made me something of a hybrid. My older siblings were teenagers when I was born, which made me part nuisance. I mean, what teenager wants to change a diaper and not get paid for it? And part novelty. I was small, easily portable, somewhat flexible. Which brings me to one of my very earliest memories, which happened sometime between this, that's me with my father, and this. That's me with my mother and 2 of my closer in age siblings. So one of my older sisters, who shall remain nameless to protect the guilty, was trying to help me out because I was struggling as a toddler with a piece of, how can I say this delicately, stubborn nasal discharge. And as she was offering her assistance, because she really loved me so very much and she was so kind and helpful, and what 16-year-old doesn't want to pick her baby sister's nose, right? So as she was helping me, I was a little resistant, and so I began to wail. And as I wailed, I moved from room to room to room throughout the house, in part to avoid the inevitable fate of having my sister's fingers up my nose, and in part to get a little dramatic effect. Now, why I remember this so clearly and so with such clarity is not because it caused trauma, lest you think it caused trauma in my life, but because of a very magical piece of technology that existed in my home. As I was going from room to room wailing, my mother sat at this small kitchen table with our elderly neighbors, and she was having them talk about their lives in Cincinnati before the Depression. And as they are there telling the stories of their lives, a new generation burst upon the scene with full of passion and energy and a very important message for them to think about. So what does that story mean and why is it important? Well, it does say something about my relationship with my older siblings, to be sure, but more than that, what it talks about is the power of stories, the telling of them and the recording of them, and how that we use them to shape our realities and the perceptions of our world around us. Now, no one would argue that storytelling isn't an important and long-held tradition in human life. From thousands of years ago, cave dwellers in Les Caux, France, were figuring out how to use paints to record the stories of what they did in their lives. And many people argue that technology saps the very lifeblood from those stories. I contend something very different, that technology amplifies those stories and allows us to make more connections and bridge more divides to explain the ever more complex realities of all of our worlds. Because we live in a lot of worlds at once right now, and they're beautiful, and they're awe-inspiring, and they're terrifying, and they're all of these things. And how we understand them is through the stories that we tell. So flash forward from that nasally challenged toddler to today, when I'm still something of a hybrid. In my reality as managing editor of soapboxmedia.com, I get to tell stories every week. From the one about the New York transplant who moved to Cincinnati and never expected to find a wildly successful business here, making seed bombs and practicing guerrilla gardening, to the ever-passionate Peggy Shannon, a pastry artist whose love for detail comes through in everything she does, whether it's elephant art or donut toast. My other reality is at the University of Cincinnati, where I'm a professor of journalism. And in that reality, I get to help shape a new generation of storytellers, to encourage them to take out their earbuds before putting on their headphones to record the stories of the world around them. And as we do this, what we're doing is carrying on a long tradition of storytellers. From those cave dwellers in Les Caux, to Nellie Bly, to Ida B. Wells, to people sitting around their kitchen tables with tape recorders, to protesters in Egypt in the Arab Spring. We tell stories to prove that we're alive, and we tell stories to prove that we have lived. And as we do this, we live now in a day whenever it's more important than ever. We all live at this intersection of technology and artisanship. And what that allows us to do is figure out that storytellers are the people who've always been most comfortable at this place, at this intersection. It's where we find our energy, it's where we find our inspiration, it's where we go about the very business of telling stories and making history. So, today, what I leave you with is a question and a challenge, with an open mic and an open mind. What story will you tell today? Thank you.